It's a great pleasure to discuss with you this important topic, and thank you very much for joining us today. This webinar will last for approximately 30 minutes. Once I go over the slides, we will have a few minutes after that for questions and answers. On today's agenda are 3 topics. First, we will talk about the wide world of data analytics and why it is critical for managers to understand how data analytics can help them and their company. In the second section, we will go over some practical examples and we'll actually do an exercise together. And finally, we will discuss what it takes to become a data-driven company. After this webinar, we will email you a copy of the slides, and we will also post this webinar to our website, and you can find it on YouTube. Now, first of all, I would like to test the chat screen and see if it works. So if you can hear me, can you type in your favorite color into the chat box? All right, I see blue from Taysir. Okay, I see another blue. White, okay, very good. Red, all right, nice. Okay, good. So it looks like most of you have been able to access that. I also want to test the polling here, and what I'll do is I'll ask you a question online, and what I'd like you to do is answer this. So the first question is, when do you think Meirc Training and Consulting was founded? So select one of the potential answers. All right, good. Yes. I'll give you another 10 seconds. And I'll end the voting in 1, 2, 3. All right, let me share the results with you. So most of you said 1993. One person answered correctly in 1958. Actually, we started in 1958, and if you look at our logo, it has 60 plus on it. All right, so good. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope that you find this webinar informative and interesting. So just a quick summary of my background. I'm an engineer by trade. I worked both in the private sector and government. In the private sector, I worked for HSBC America. I also worked for a data mining company called Correlation, and in consulting in McKinsey. In the government sector, I worked for the governments of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. But I don't want to take up too much of your time, so let's start out with an overview of data analytics. Now, before starting this meeting, I want to tell you something that happened this morning. Obviously, a lot of us are working from home, and the biggest challenge working from home is the family. It's very difficult for little children to stay quiet and not to interrupt you. So whenever I have a webinar, I always tell my daughters, please, nobody come in. So one of my daughters asked me, she said, Baba, what are you doing today? And I told her I'm giving a webinar on data analytics. And of course, she asked me what data analytics was. So what I'd like you to do is type in your understanding of data analytics, and how would you explain it to a little child? A child comes and says, what is data analytics? What would you define it as? Go ahead, type in your chat box, please. Okay, so first from Muhammad saying it's a summary of big data to suit your requirements. Very good. Trying to analyze data to obtain some information. Being able to understand things from set of data. Benefiting from the information that we have. Okay, very good. Reaching a conclusion from a set of data. Okay, excellent. I really like those explanations, and I think you've covered most of the things that we look at in data analysis. So to me, data analytics is about a process of gathering, sorting, processing, and then studying business data, and using statistical models and different methodologies to transform data into business insights. The goal of business analytics is to determine which data sets are useful and how we can leverage them to solve problems, increase efficiency, productivity, and revenue. So data is everywhere, and according to Accenture, data is growing at a considerable rate. It's growing at 40% annually. Now, for people who work in finance, 40% annually is a huge, huge number. It can actually double every 2 years. So if I ask you, how much do you think of all data was created in the last 2 years? Maybe if you give me a percentage, what do you think? 10% of data was created in the last 2 years, 50%? Go ahead and type into your chat box. 90%. Okay, 75. Okay, 35, 80. Okay, good. Actually, somebody told you the answer. You Googled it already because you are absolutely correct. It is 90%. So what does that mean to you, that 90% of data was created in the last 2 years? So can you type in a little bit about what does that mean for you? What does it mean for companies? Huge data to deal with, yes. Rapid growth, absolutely. Yep, you can make more informed decisions. Very good. So good, it's more focus, yes. So definitely those are things that are important. There's more data to data mine and to look at. But what it means also is that data is being created so quickly that you have to take advantage of it. You can't wait for months to analyze the data. You need to do it right now. So what that means really is that companies that move quickly will have an advantage. And this is where we're going. And some of the examples that I'll show you is of companies that have made use of data and how they've grown considerably over their competition. So according to Accenture also, is that every day we have 2.5 quintillion bytes of data that's created. Now, I didn't know what quintillion meant, so I am going to ask you this question. So how many zeros do you think are in a quintillion? All right, no cheating, don't Google it. I know some of you are. Okay, give you 10 more seconds. All right, I'll end the voting in 1, 2, 3. So let's see the results. So most of you said 18 zeros, and actually you are correct. It is 18 zeros, which really doesn't make a lot of sense, is that people don't know what that it means. All that it means is that it's a huge, huge amount of data. This will get bigger as time goes by. So the forecasts are that this year we will have 50 billion different connected devices that have sensors. So it's not just computers, it's things like your phones, your smart watches, even devices, the Internet of Things that are going on. So really, business is just getting more data-driven than ever. 82% of executives say that they're going to use data more, and it really is going to drive critical decisions. And close to 90% of companies think that big data will revolutionize the way people do business. In the same way, the internet, think about how big the internet was. There's the time before internet and after internet. But this number I see as quite important, that nearly 80% of companies who do not embrace big data will actually lose their competitive position and might go out of business. It's a huge number. So if you think of somebody working in data analytics as a detective, the issue is that how do we explore and investigate business problems, and how do we come up with the different opportunities? And we need to do that in a scientific way. We can't just do it in an ad hoc way. So there are different data analytics methods, and what I've done is I've chosen to break it down by time. So a lot of companies do that, and they're getting better at that. And they look at the past and they do something called descriptive analytics. And they ask the question, what happened? So can somebody give me an example of companies doing a data analytics exercise and asking what happened? What would be an example? Yeah, so profit, basically, very good. But I want something a little bit more specific, something that a data analyst would look at and come to the management and say, this is something that is interesting. So not just expenses and last year's sales, that's something that we're all used to. But I want something a little bit more surgical, a little bit more to do with data analysis. Okay, how many businesses closed? Okay, good. But I want something even more specific than that. So let me give you an example. So a company might go in and a data analyst might say that sales went down in Europe in men aged 21 to 30. So it's not just about sales went down, and it's not just about where they went down, but the more specific you can get, the more helpful it can be. So why would you want to be as specific as possible? So go ahead, type in your chat box. Yeah, focus on the market. So descriptive is you need something that is beyond just the normal. Yes, we know that sales are going down. We know that sales are going down in Europe, but what really can you give me data that can be actionable? So after going from past, we go to the future and we say, what is likely to happen based on past trends? So if we go back to our example of sales going down in Europe in men aged 21 to 30. Now, if your product sells mainly to men aged 21 to 30, what does that mean? A change in your business, right? It means actually that you will lose most of your customers in the next year or so. Now, prescriptive is what, or let me go to diagnostic actually and ask the question, why did it happen? So why did sales go down in Europe, specifically within that demographic? So let me give you an example. So when I was involved in a credit card campaign, so the credit card campaigns in the USA are huge. You could do a mailing of about 30 million credit card offers. And typically the response rate, what do you think the response rate for a mailing? So this happens in a lot of countries. They just mail people different offers. What percentage of people do you think respond? So I see 10%, 3%, 5, 50. Okay, good. So it actually is 1% or less. So if you imagine it's 1%, a 1.1% or 0.9 can make a huge difference in the profitability. So we used to do this every 3 months, and we would call it base 1, base 2, base 3. And typically all of them would be around 1%, maybe 0.95, 1.05, something like that. Until one campaign we did, and it dropped by 50%, meaning that the response rate was only 0.5%. Now that made a huge difference. Actually, the manager of that campaign got fired because it's a huge amount of money. Now, what you need to do is a lot of people will come to the data analysts and ask them to say, why did that happen? Why did this specific credit card campaign have a much lower response rate when we've been doing the same campaigns for years and all of them have been around 1%? So what would you look at? How would you actually go about something like this? So type in your response if you could think about a possible reason why one campaign had a much lower response rate than others. So we have one answer type of audience. Yeah, so maybe we sent it out to a different demographic. We actually looked at that, and that we saw that it was the same demographic. So we looked at income, we looked at age, we looked at place. Okay, study the purchasing power, the timing. Okay, so Taysir definitely has something there. So it was about the timing. The timing, something happened during that time. Something better found by the customer, yes. So what it turned out to be was that American Express, which is a huge, huge company, made a big offer during that time. And it wasn't something that was well known right away. So sometimes the diagnostics are not just about looking at data and looking at Excel spreadsheets, but it's more about looking at the market. So the last one I want to talk about is the future. What should happen if we take a certain path? And if we have uncertainty, what is the best outcome? Now, usually what happens is data scientists come up with models and they come up with probabilities. And they say, for example, the probability is 70% that we'll get this type of response, 20% that we'll get something less. But anyway, this is just an introduction. Let me go through and give you a little bit more examples that can make this a little bit clearer about how companies do this. Oh, Netflix. A lot of people use Netflix, and Netflix is a up and coming company. It's not actually up and coming company, it's actually huge right now. So let me ask you this question and let's see, how many customers do you think does Netflix have? Go ahead. Okay, see one response 50, two people saying 100. I'll give you 3 more seconds. 1, 2, 3. So these are your answers here, and most of you answered it correctly. It's 200 million people. Oh, the question is then, how much do you think the market capitalization of Netflix is? So let me actually do another survey and ask you that. And let's see if you can. Oh, sorry, I put the wrong one in here. Okay, let me do that again. There you go. So what is the approximate value or market capitalization of Netflix? If if somebody wanted to buy Netflix, how much would they have to pay? Okay, good. Any more answers? All right, so I'll end in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. And let me show you the results. So most of you said 50 billion and actually 110. The correct answer is 210 billion. So let me just put that into context. Disney, which was founded in 1923, it has many theme parks, studios, it sells toys. Disney is a huge company. Disney has a market capitalization of 230 billion, so a little bit more than Netflix. So Netflix only started in 1997. And one of the things that if you ask analysts why Netflix, it has 200 million while others don't have that much, there are a lot of other companies that do streaming also, is the use of their data. So what data do you think does Netflix collect about you? So type in some of the data that you think that Netflix gathers. Preference, age, what kind of programs you'd like, yes. What else? Think more specific. So age preferences, yes, interesting, but a big thing in data analytics is to really be surgical. Look at, okay, the time of entering, when, that would be very interesting. When do people watch certain programs? Okay, good. Anything else? All right. So what data they collect is quite interesting. So what they do is, of course, they collect things like they want to discover the customer behavior and buying patterns and use that to come up with recommendations of movies and TV shows. So what Netflix says is actually 75% of viewers' activity is based off personalized recommendation. So if you have Netflix, you might come up and they will recommend certain TV shows and movies based on it. But it's not just based on what you've viewed. They collect a lot of data. So they collect customer interaction, response to a TV show. So for example, as you said, they know the time and date that a user watched the show. They know what device was used. So are people using a browser? Are they using their phone? Are they watching at home? But they do also collect information about if the show was paused. And does the viewer resume watching after pausing? And do people finish an entire show or not? And how long does it take for a user to finish a show? And so on. So there's something called Netflix binging. What's that? Has anybody heard that show, that term? So go ahead and type a response in the chat box if you no. All right, good. No. All right. So has anybody watched an entire season in 1 and 2 days? Any of you? Yes. That's okay. No. Yeah. So some people have. And actually, Netflix does collect that type of data. It would be interesting for them to know that the types of shows where people want to watch 3 or 4 or 5 episodes after each other. It's a very different behavior than one where people just watch a show every day or every 2 days. Now, also, what Netflix has is screenshots of scenes where people go back and watch repeatedly. So it might be an action scene, for example, a car crashing to another car. And that's how they know what do people want. And that's how, the type of detailed profile they collect. And they use that to come up with the next generation of movies. So it's not just about, they don't just come up with movies and see anybody who comes to them with a script, they don't just take it, but they only green light. So accepting a movie, they only green light it based on several touch points, what we call them. So touch points is not just the age, demographics, what people watch, but also things about pausing, about binging, about watching shows right after each other. So those are things that Netflix collects. And Netflix actually is a leader when it comes to big data. So does anybody know how Netflix started? So they were founded in 1997. Obviously, in 1997, there was nothing called streaming because at that time, data was, or the internet was based on a modem. It would give you that sound. You would call by phone. You would connect by phone. It was something that was very slow. So does anybody know how Netflix started? You know, type in a guess what type of company they were. So I see somebody typing. Theaters, good guess. Anybody else? Rental. Yeah. Okay. Talal is actually correct. They rented out DVDs and they rented it out by mail. So what they would have is they would have a warehouse and people would call in and they would request DVDs and they would mail them to you. Now, Netflix came in and actually did much better than other companies. It's not a very difficult idea to do. But what Netflix did, it actually started predicting what type of movies, DVDs people would want to watch. And what would happen, it would send these samples to people and people would watch them and they would go, wow, how does this company know more about me than I do or about my preferences than I do about myself? All right, let's work on A. But all of this, I mean, I don't think anybody works at Netflix. So let's do another example here. Let me ask you, what do you think is a big waste of time at companies? Now, I know a lot of you are working from home, but when we used to work in the office a while back, what was the biggest waste of time? Gathering data, okay? Analyzing data? No, that's not a waste of time. But where do people waste their time the most? Think about the company overall. Gossiping. Meetings, very good. All right, that's absolutely right. So meetings. What do you think happens in most companies? They waste time in meetings because meetings don't start on time. So you end up waiting for a while until the meeting starts. So how much do you think it costs? How would you actually go about figuring out how much money do companies lose because of starting late? What would you do? How would you go about figuring that out? So imagine yourself that you're a data analyst and your manager comes to you and says, I had another meeting that was canceled. I waited for half an hour, nobody came. I am sick of this. I want you to give me an estimate of how much money we waste because of late meetings. Okay, so I see salaries times time lost. Very good. How would you calculate time lost? So type in if you can figure out so how to calculate. What would you do to calculate time lost? Because people can make estimates, but it's really not true. You need some robust data. You actually need some data that you can stick by and say this is valid. So what you need to do is think like a data scientist to collect that data. You really need to trust it. So first of all, what you would need to do is come up with a definition. So a definition of time lost. So, and then draw a picture and maybe start collecting that data. So let me show you what, as a data analyst, what somebody would collect. Okay, so this is based on an article written on Harvard Business Review, how to start thinking like a data scientist. So one of the people, he had this question. So what he did is during a month, he collected data every day. So for each day, he would look at when meetings started and how long, how much time was wasted. So you can see that some meetings were canceled after 30 minutes. Some meetings started on time or even before time, but the average is 12 minutes. So 12 minutes were lost from meetings. So now what you can do is you can say, well, is my definition correct? Because sometimes meetings only start when the senior person is there. You have to come up with a good definition, but let's assume that people lose 12 minutes because of late meetings. So now the question is, so what? Now, so what is a question that is asked is that just providing me data doesn't mean anything. You need to tell me, what does this mean? So what does this mean to you? How would you actually present to the CEO? You want to present an argument to the CEO that we really need to start meetings on time. And you show him the graph that we lose 12 minutes. And he really doesn't understand what that means. So 12 minutes a meeting, yeah, it's okay. Not that huge. So this is the type of analysis that you would do. You would say, for example, that executives attend 3 meetings per day or 2 meetings per day. Their salary is maybe $100 an hour. So you would multiply that by the number of executives and the number of meeting of times they have. And I did a quick calculation on a company that had 1,000 people. And if you have 1,000 people, then you lose $6 million a year because of 12 minutes per meeting. Now that is something that's actionable. That is something that the CEO can say, look, we need to hire a consultant and we can pay that consultant up to 6 million if he can come up with ways to make sure that our meetings start on time. So somebody's saying that they lost the voice, and we have our technical assistant here that will help with that, and I'll just continue. So the question is this losing 12 minutes, and based on your calculation, is this a big deal? Is this a problem? Yes or no? Type in what you think. Yes, it's a problem. Sure. Hassan says sure. Yes, but convert it to dollars, $6 million, right? So a company that has 1,000 employees is losing $6 million a year because of late meetings. Okay, so I agree with you. It is quite an interesting data point. But if you look at some of the analyses that tell you that having late meetings sometimes can actually help socially with the employees, because what do people do when meetings are late? Catch up. Yes, absolutely. They gossip. So gossiping is actually not bad. People catch up, they talk to each other about different projects, they socialize. And building this social fabric within a company is good for morale. So it's all of these things that you have to take into account when trying to come up with a decision on what to do next. Just providing the data and saying that it cost us $6 million is good, but it's not enough. Your value as a data analyst will be so much higher if you can come up with these different insights. So quickly, I know that we're running out of time. So I want to do another quick example based on car accidents. And then what we'll do is we will just try to open it up for questions and answers. So this is an example of a country where the number of car accidents has doubled within 15 years. So the question is, so what? So type in, you have actually come up with this data. You go to the Prime Minister and you say, Your Excellency, the number of car accidents has doubled. What's the so what about this chart? Hey, I can see people typing. Go ahead and type your answer. Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds and then I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so let me give you something maybe to help with the so what. One of the poor drivers, yeah, you could do that, but you could say, okay, here's a so what. Our roads are much more dangerous and the chief of police should be fired. So let's do this survey over here. And I want you to answer this question. Should we fire the chief of police? Yes, no, or not enough data? Okay, 5 more seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me share the results for you. So nobody said yes. One person said no. So most of you said that we need more data. So what other data do you need? So type in just about the number of car accidents going up. What is the one other data point that you would need to be able to answer the question about whether the chief of police should be fired or not? So Taysir says increased in number of cars. Hey, anybody else? Cost. That's important. Anyone else? Violations. Okay, good. So let me, as Taysir was saying, let me add this. So the number of car accidents went up 2 times. You see the 2x. I'm going to add this data here. The number of registered cars between 2000 and 2015 increased by 4x, 4 times. Now, would you fire the chief of police or not? So let me ask you. Yes, no, not enough data. Okay, so people said, have half of them said no or not enough data. Actually, this tells you that the chief of police is actually doing a good job. Because if you take the accident rate, which means the number of accidents divided by the number of registered cars, you would see that that actually we're becoming safer. Oh, I would say that the chief of police is doing a good job. Of course, this is very simplified. It's a very simplified. There are other things like violations, technology, cars that are going up, but we're heading in the right direction. So in the year 2000, 2.47% of cars got into an accident, where 2015, only 1.38%. Now, of course, you could slice it and dice it even more. You could go in and you can say, well, are we having more deadly accidents? Are people dying more? But I just wanted to give you a flavor of it's just not enough to look at the surface, that you need to go into more detail. So how do you go about being a data-driven company? You can start out being a data apathetic company, or apathetic means that you don't care. So business decisions are rarely, if ever, driven by data. They're driven by gut feeling or by emotions. And I think that as time goes by, the companies that are just driven by your gut feeling without looking at the data are not going to do too well. The second stage is companies that are data aware. And this is where I think most companies are. They're capturing data, but they're only using it for awareness purposes. So for example, do you know that last year our sales went down in Europe and in the age of 21 to 30 for males? So it's more of saying that, oh, we have a problem. But the next stage is being data critical, and here being sophisticated about your data assets, and not only for mission critical areas, but looking at maybe specific products and looking at different demographics, and being surgical in the way that you look at data. And the final thing is being data driven. Your organization is all about giving me the facts, systems, processes, people working together to use data, and they're using it more efficiently. So Accenture, it gives a different steps that you can do for data analysis. I won't go through all of them because we are running out of time, but it starts with collecting data. You need to clean it, and it's called scrubbing because data is not usually in the formats that we want. Explore it, visualize, and then build your different models. And finally, interpret it, predict, interpret, and then come up with the so what. So we've come back to the end of our webinar. If you want to learn more about how Meirc Training and Consulting can help with data and data analytics, we have several courses that are IIBA endorsed. I know this isn't big, but you can go to our website. We have a course on analytical thinking. We have a course on data analysts, and we have a course on big data and data analytics, and that's given by Plus, which is our sister company. And most of our courses when it comes to data analytics are endorsed by IIBA. IIBA is the organization on business analysis. So what I want to do is I want to thank you very much for being with us today. And what we're going to do, like I said before, we're going to post this on our website, on YouTube, and also for the people who have been here today, we are going to send you a PDF copy of this presentation. And thank you very much again, and thank you for participating, and I hope to see you in one of our courses.
Meirc.com